Hello, I'm Leo Puglisi. Welcome into Six News Sport. We are halfway through the 2024 Victorian Football League season. It has already been a pretty exciting season so far. As it stands, Werribee, last year's grand finalists, are up there in the top four. Gold Coast is just teetering in and out of the top 10, and up at the very top of the ladder, you've got Footscray and Geelong. Meanwhile, at the bottom end, two AFL reserves clubs, Collingwood and Carlton, while Coburg and the Northern Bullets, they're at the bottom end, but they've gotten their first wins in ages. It has been a massive season so far and is set to get bigger later in the year. To discuss all of that, we spoke with VFL reporter and commentator Brendan Rhodes.
Thanks for having us, Leo. It's great to talk VFL with you, and you're doing a great job. So,
thank you.
With Footscray, 20 wins in their last 21 games they had before last week's game against the Brisbane Lions. I think they started last year 2-6. It's the way I looked at it this morning when I was doing my match reports. So they won their last 11 games last season to get into the finals. Went down, of course, in that semi to the Box Hill Hawks. And then, obviously, this year won the first 9. Ran into a very, very good team on Friday afternoon in the Brisbane Lions. I was there for that game, and you cannot give me an explanation as to why Jared Lyons is not playing AFL footy after winning the Liston last year, and then the performance he put in on Friday, 29 disposals, 3 goals, just dripping with class. And Footscray still showed that they are a fair dinkum team. They lost 2 players in the first quarter against the team who I had as premiership favourites at the start of the year. So the Bulldogs are around the mark again, and it wouldn't surprise me to see those 2 playing off again on the last Sunday in September, the third Sunday in September, I think it is actually.
Geelong's also been interesting because I hadn't paid too much attention to them until I saw their win over Sydney when it said 8 in a row. And I'm like, what's been happening there? And I know it's interesting because obviously they've had some success since obviously 2000 when the VFL was all changed. They've never been affiliated with another club. They've always done this standalone agreement, and it seems to have worked out pretty well for them. Tell us about what's happening over there, because again, it just seems to have come out of, at least for me, and you pay a lot more attention than I do, but it seems to have come out of a bit of nowhere.
I'm not going to disagree with you on that one. 8 wins in a row. Yeah, they lost their first 2 games of the season quite convincingly, way back in March. And I thought, well, my early decision and my early predictions, and don't take this the wrong way, Cats fans, was that I actually had them down in the bottom 6, because I thought they finished, I think, 13th or 14th last year. Seemed to have lost more than they'd gained with best and fairest winner Jai Chalcraft headed over to Swan Districts. Tom Panuccio went in the same direction. So it seemed like they had a weaker team than last year, and they've just ticked over. They won the first couple of games. I think they beat the Northern Bullets in round 3 to get themselves underway. A convincing, a comfortable but not convincing performance, and then they've just racked them up. There was one game that made everyone turn and have a look at them when they beat Carlton by 101 points, and obviously the Blues have shown to be struggling a little bit since then, sitting on the bottom of the ladder as it stands. But yeah, they've won these games by a goal, 2 goals, 3 goals, just getting the job done, which is all you have to do. And 8-2 at the midway point of the season has them really well placed to make a push at it. And they do have one player there once again who you have to wonder how far away his AFL opportunity is in the mid-season draftee from last year in Mitch Hardy. He's been absolutely dominant at the VFL level, and a big part of why they're going as well as they have. Toby Conway is the other one. We've seen him in and out of the AFL team. He's a star in the making, and I don't think Geelong needs to worry too much about the future and going to find another ruckman from somewhere else, because they've got one on their books right there.
Yeah, and look, what you mentioned the Blues there. We'll get to the bottom of the ladder in a moment, but just quickly staying at the top here, Werribee is in third at the moment. Obviously, one of the grand finalists last year. They're doing pretty significantly well over Gold Coast. Gold Coast is just in the wild card position at the moment. They're teetering there with Frankston. I will get to Frankston as well soon. But yeah, Werribee, they really look like they're wanting to finally get that drought breaker. And especially, I mean, last year, such an amazing effort for them. Obviously, a bit of a heartbreaker at the end. Mind you, of course, huge milestone for Gold Coast. But yeah, how do you make of how they're going? Because I saw them earlier in the year and they seem to be kind of like, oh, they're doing okay, they're doing so. I think they had a loss as well at one point, which caught me out by surprise. I don't remember which club it was against. But yeah, what do you make of how the Bees are going?
The one you're probably remembering was Williamstown, where they got beaten
That's
very
it.
badly on Good Friday by about 70 or 80 points, I think. But apart from that, no surprises from me. A lot of people wrote Werribee's chances off this year, given the amount of experience that went out the door after the grand final with Sodom Marco and Gribble retiring. Sean Manor got drafted. There was 3 or 4 other really experienced players that moved on at the end of last season. Matt Hanson was another one, another 100 gamer. But I knew they still had enough sitting underneath that and enough class coming through to be able to have another solid season. They're well and truly in premiership contention, ticking the game over, and they've got a heap of milestones to live for in the second half of the year. As you'd know, Dom Brew, the heart and soul of the club, now played his 100th game on the weekend. It was also Werribee's 1100th game in VFL footy. They had a good win over Frankston. They've got, I think, 5 more players set to play their 100th game between now and the finals. So there is still a heap of experience and star power right there at the Tigers. They're not going anywhere. As for Gold Coast, you mentioned, well, they lost 14 premiership players at the end of last season, either through delistings or trades or retirements. So it was always going to be a new look team. They're going to be strong because they have the extra numbers on their AFL list. So they're always going to be able to field more AFL listed players. But I think I had them a little bit higher than the 10th spot they're in at the moment. But I still think they will finish a little bit higher than that. A couple of draws sort of affects their position at the moment.
And I think they lost to Richmond right at the start of the year, didn't they?
They did round 1 up on the Gold Coast, and they looked like they were going to struggle to kick goals. They'd lost 250 goals out of their forward line among those 14 players that left. The two Frosty Miller medalists, Chris Burgess went to Adelaide, Brody McLaughlin got delisted, so there was over 50 goals each. I think Alex Sexton got moved to defence. There's another 40 goals. Sam Day was the only one. Marby Chol went to Hawthorn. There was another 40 goals gone. Sam Day's the only one left, and so it looked like they were going to have trouble finding avenues to goal. But they've certainly shown that they can do it. They kicked 24, I think, against Southport or the Brisbane Lions in a game up there. So underestimate them at your own peril. They're still going to be a very dangerous floater, even though they're not going to be up there in the top 4, I don't think, by the end of the season.
Will be really interesting watching them. I will get to the standalones in a moment, but just looking at the bottom of the ladder, 2 AFL reserves clubs in Collingwood and Carlton. Essendon's pretty low as well with, I think they're on 12 points at the moment. But Collingwood and Carlton in particular, both have lost to the Northern Bullants. It's Collingwood obviously lost to Coburg, which broke the Coburg losing streak. What exactly is going on there? Because I know that obviously there are AFL injuries that have to be taken into account. But usually these clubs, they usually find a decent few top-up players, and especially, the experience and the chance to play with some AFL-listed players and train at an AFL club. It seems pretty unusually low for them.
I think that is the key there. You mentioned the injuries at AFL level sort of means that they don't have a lot of experience on their AFL list down at VFL level. Collingwood only had 8, I think, AFL listed players against the Casey Demons yesterday, and the majority of them, if I have a quick look at the team feed I have here, if I could find it, so I think it's over there somewhere. I apologise.
All good.
They weren't big names. They're all young guys coming in, or players who lost their spot in the AFL team the week before, and to me, none of them made a big impact yesterday. They relied far too heavily on the VFL players who go all right. But I think Illaru Smith, the mid-season draftee who actually made his debut, didn't come onto the ground until the start of the second quarter, but was probably the best competitor out of their AFL list. At one stage, you were right. They helped Coburg break a 26-match losing streak. They helped the Northern Bull Ants break a 19-match losing streak. And at one stage, they were the only team to have lost to Essendon before the Bombers picked up a couple of wins in the last couple of weeks, beating North Melbourne, and then yesterday coming from 41 points down early in the second quarter to beat Carlton. As for the Blues, well, I heard an interesting stat last week that has obviously been extended with their second half collapse yesterday. They are the first AFL reserves team to sit on the bottom of the ladder this far through the season since the alignments and the AFL reserves teams actually came into this competition in 2000. So that's remarkable. An amazing stat. And I think that again has to do with a lot of injuries at AFL level, and the VFL listed players have not been able to pick up that slack at this stage. They're playing a lot of young guys making their way through and learning the caper at the moment.
Now, they are at the bottom end, right? But Coburg and the Northern Bull Ants have undoubtedly improved so far. And of course, I'm conscious in saying that as someone who works for the Northern Bull Ants. But nevertheless, I'd say it anyway. Clearly, obviously, some of the margins have been a lot less for the Ants than we were seeing late last year, when it was just getting, really, really the constant blowouts. And the fact that Coburg's managed to get, obviously, their first win in over a season and then a second win so far, it's a really good story, and it is good for footy.
Oh, without a doubt, 2 wins each for these teams, and the Bull Ants beating Collingwood and Carlton is something for them to really hang their hat on. Coburg knocking off the Magpies and the Casey Demons, and we saw how good Casey can be yesterday when they beat Collingwood by a very comfortable margin. So they were outstanding in those two games. Coburg. I thought that Coburg would improve, an extra year together as a squad. The coach, Jamie Cassidy McNamara, has a year under his belt. A lot of the players have a year under their belt. They lost their key forward, their main goal kicker in Aaron Clark, to Perth during the off-season. So the question was going to be who would step up and kick some goals. They found that to be an issue at times. They don't really have that call option outside of Will Bella. So that's probably where things fall down a bit for them. They've got to move it quickly and move the ball low. They can't just bomb it into the forward line like they did against North Melbourne on Saturday, because tall defenders will just pick them off every time. And that's what happened against the Kangaroos. They almost won the game when they decided to take it on the way they did against the Demons the week before. As for the Bull Ants, we had no idea what to expect, because, as you know, struggled really badly at the end of last year and completely turned over the list. I think there was only about 9 players still there from last season, but they just continue to aim up. They're a team that never gives up, even when they were getting flogged at the end of last year. They never gave up, and to come from behind to win the games the way they have. They've had a third player inside 12 months taken by an AFL club, with Sardell Hawley getting drafted last week. send our wishes to him. Hopefully, the knee injury he picked up yesterday is not too bad, because he starred with, I think, 27 disposals and 4 goals against Carlton yesterday to get his team back in the mix. But yeah, Rowan Welsh is doing a wonderful job, as is Darren Bassett and Walt there as well, to pick that club up and keep them going, fighting against the tide. So well done to them, and hopefully there's more wins coming.
I look forward to seeing those. Just quickly on the standlines before I get a mention of Sardar Hooley as well, right? Frankston is, I guess, the third club that's been called one of the struggling standalones, quote unquote, over the past few years. They were better than both Coburg and the Bull Ants last year, and they're doing really, really well for themselves in comparison this year. They're sitting just outside of the top 10, and I think they had their best start in something like 25 years, 5-2 as well. What do you make of how they're going? And I guess the one concern which I seem to have seen, which is their inaccuracy, even in some of their wins, it has just, I guess, if they're aiming as high as they can go, right, you just can't have that kind of inaccuracy, you'd think.
Well, exactly right. 8-11 again against Werribee. I don't think they were ever going to beat Werribee, but it cost them a chance to compete. To be a chance to maybe push Werribee right to the limit. It cost them the game against Sandringham last week. Before that, it hadn't cost them a game, but it was always threatening to do so. And I think, off the top of my head, that means they've now kicked 89 goals and 133 behinds for the year. And there's only about 20 of those 133 behinds have been rushed. So it is a repeat offence. It's a problem that is coming again and again and again. If they can fix that up, there's no reason to suggest that they can't make the finals. They do have another game. They do have return games to come against Port Melbourne, Northern Bull Ants, and Coburg. All games that they could and possibly will lose if they kick that badly. But if they straighten it up, they could win, because Jackson Cornberg is a wonderful coach in his first year at the club. No disrespect to Danny Ryan, who did a great job with them. But Jackson Cornberg got Gold Coast into a preliminary final. He's come there and yeah, he's got them playing really good football. And yeah, that is the key. They're down to 5-5 now, so they're right on the edge of that. They've got to win probably another 5 games to sneak into the top 10, make the finals. I think it's been 17 years since they've been in the finals. So they're a real chance to do so, but they've got to learn to kick goals.
And it would be a remarkable story, even if they just did make finals, given, I mean, in recent memory, they were out of the competition, right? It would be a huge boost for them. And I mean, I've, gone down to Frankston over for both Hawthorn AFLW games, but also for when the Bull Ants were playing away a couple of weeks ago. And I mean, the atmosphere there, it's fantastic. You see that local footy atmosphere. They've got a great crowd and very, very passionate supporters. So it would be good for them. And I think a good home ground advantage as well. Just on the individuals, right? You mentioned Sardar Hooley. We've had a bunch of VFL listed players drafted this year. We had plenty drafted last year in terms of both mid-season and in the off-season as well. It is amazing opportunities for them, and right, it's great to see Sardar Hooley out there, as you say. We hope he's all right with that injury we saw at the end there. But do you worry that it impacts those, especially, standalones like the Bull Ants, it impacts, these clubs because, what concession do they get for it, right? They're losing, obviously, some of their best players. They're clearly good enough to be at AFL level. Do you think that is, I guess, possibly a concern or a negative out of the mid-season, as good as these individual stories are? And I really, really can't emphasize how good these are.
Yeah, it's something that could potentially be looked at by the AFL. I'm not sure what they can do in the immediacy of losing a key player like El Hawley from the Bull Ants, and of course Brandon Ryan last year. Finbar Maley was taken at the end of the season, so you can plan for that. Frankston has had 5 or 6, I think, picked up in the last 3 or 4 years, none in the mid-season draft. But yeah, so losing a player halfway through the year really does affect a standalone club badly immediately for the rest of that particular season. What it does do is it gives them a huge leg up as a potential destination club. So if you think that you're a chance to go and you're not really getting much of a go at an AFL reserves team because the AFL players are coming back, pushing you out of the side, when you've been dominating, you can go to a standalone. You know you're going to play every game. If you have a really good season, the recruiters are going to notice you. Sean Manor is the most recent one of those. Went from Richmond to Werribee, absolutely turned it on, found himself on an AFL list. He's played a couple of games. George Gray has gone to Frankston this year from the Casey Demons. He's out with a fractured cheekbone at the moment. Unfortunately, he'll miss 6 weeks, which is a massive blow for them. But he's another one come across to do that. Angus Hicks has followed Sean Manor from Werribee to Richmond this year and is playing some good football as well. So if you go to a standalone club, you know that you can get yourself picked up. And while a lot of the players that come into the VFL and go to standalones seem to gravitate towards the big three, such as Williamstown, Port Melbourne, and Werribee, players getting drafted out of Frankston, the Northern Bull Ants, and Coburg. There hasn't been one for a couple of years out of Coburg. I think Flynn Gentili is really close, potentially at the end of this year. But they've produced the likes of Adam Sard and Luke Ryan, who have come through that program. And go to these clubs, play good footy, and it's a real boost for the club in that way. But as I said right from the start, I don't know what they can do to help them immediately when they lose a player.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right about the destination club. I mean, it puts the Bull Ants on the map in some way, and it was great to see all the even just the club being mentioned out there in the national footy media, and also, mind you, no disrespect to Sardar Hooley, of course, but we lose him and then beat Carlton, so we're doing all right. Sam Gilbert, of course, came in, which was a bit of an incredible story if you look at how that's playing out.
And wonderful to see too, an even better advertisement for the Bull Ants to do that on Channel 7 in front of the statewide audience, sitting down on a Sunday afternoon. They get a very rare Sunday TV game. It was chosen over the Port Melbourne Williamstown derby, which is usually the big standalone showdown of the year, and they produced. It could have been a bad look if they'd played that game and been badly beaten in front of that big audience, but they turned it on and they won in style. So that's another big advertisement and a big tick for the Northern Bull Ants.
Yeah, I think it was last year as well, and maybe the year before as well. I think Bull Ants played Richmond and Collingwood in Channel 7 games, lost both of those. They weren't particularly good, but you're right, it was a fantastic advertisement for the for the club, and again, good to see Sam Gilbert out there just as some leadership. Just finally, obviously, we're as I said, halfway through the season now. We've got the finals, the final game fixture releases, which is always good. Will be interesting to see where clubs go in terms of home ground advantages and things like that. I know the Bull Ants have a great home run towards the end of the season. But what do you make of the clubs that are kind of, we've talked about Gold Coast, we've talked about Frankston, but the ones who are really teetering? Sandringham has obviously come and done some pretty amazing things there past 2 games, that come from behind against Frankston, and then the draw the other day. Sydney has been going all right, especially compared to last year. Brisbane and Richmond obviously up there, and Williamstown and Box Hill. I mean, again, they're always up there, right? So how do you see the remaining 10 or so games playing out?
Richmond, and we've already spoken about Frankston. Richmond is the other big story of the year. They have been destroyed by injuries completely. Everyone in the national media talks about their 5 ACLs. There's actually 8. there's 3 VFL listed players who are out with ACL injuries as well, suffered this year, and yet they keep winning. 6-4, sitting 9th on the ladder, doing a wonderful job. You're just waiting week to week for them to hit a tipping point and fall over, and they just don't. And that's a huge credit to them, their coach Steve Morris, and the entire list that's keeping going. One of those 8 is their VFL captain, Lockie Street, their heart and soul of the VFL team for the last 3 or 4 years. So for them to keep going is an amazing effort. I'm looking at the top 10 teams as it stands. The ones that are outside probably need a fair bit to go right now. I'm not going to say that it's locked away, but Frankston sitting outside. They've got a draw coming home with teams below them. Sydney is half a game out of the top 10 right now. They've got a bye this week, I think. They've just had a bye, and then they've got a trip to Brisbane to play the Lions in their next game, which is going to be a massive test. So they will probably have to pinch a result away from home against a good team. Actually, it's Footscray away this week, and then Brisbane away coming up, and they've also got an away game against Sandringham in a few weeks' time. So they're going to need to win at least one of those, I think, to stay in contention. North Melbourne is good enough. They've just come off a 6-match losing streak. Port Melbourne is definitely good enough. If they can sort things out, they can go on a run. And we know the Casey Demons can be good enough. I think you'd nearly put a line through the rest of them. It's hard to see even a couple that I've mentioned getting in, because last year 10th spot on the ladder was 10 wins and 8 losses and a good percentage. And Carlton was 11th, 10 wins, 8 losses, and they lost a heap of percentage in the last game to fall out. So when you're looking at the teams, even at 14th spot, Port Melbourne 3 and 7, they're going to have to win probably 7 of their last 8 games to make the finals. They can do that, but they'll have to really get on a tear to get there. I think it might be 9 wins that gets in, but there's some teams down there in the bottom half of the ladder that are really starting to push. What's the word without swearing? They're really under pressure to stay in contention.
It'll be fascinating watching. Richmond, I mean, you're right. They have, I would be expecting them on paper to be, bottom 5, right? And they had that giant loss against Sandringham, and then what do they do the next week? They bounce back in an MCG curtain raiser for the Dreamtime, right? And it's an incredible run for them. So full credit, I guess, for keeping them together. Look, it's going to be fascinating watching. I'm sure we'll catch up later in the year as well. It is looking like a great VFL season so far. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Leo. Appreciate it.
That is 6 News Sport for now. You can, of course, watch all the latest editions on our YouTube channel. Just search 6NewsAU to find us. And you can, of course, watch 6 News Live 24/7, also on our YouTube channel and our website, 6newsau.com. For now, though, I'm Leo Puglisi. Thanks for your company.